and welcome to a special edition of Center Focus. I'm Mike Fortunio.
And I'm Nick Lombardo, along with Kayla Lang and Unique Miles.
Today, on a special edition of Center Focus, we are reporting on what many are calling the deadliest epidemic in modern American history. It's killing thousands of Americans, including many Pennsylvanians, every day and month. And here in Pennsylvania, there has been a state of emergency issued for 2 years now.
We're talking about America's opioid crisis and the search for solutions to stem the tide of addiction and overdose deaths that have been dramatically rising for over 2 decades. There are hundreds of issues and debates, and today we will explore just a few of the key issues through the eyes and testimony of those who deal with it in some way every day here in central Pennsylvania.
This includes those who are fighting addiction and the communities and families of those who have suffered or died. We also talk with many of the public agencies, elected officials, and first responders who deal with this crisis every day. We begin with an overview of the problem and what opioids actually are. For that, we go to Georgia Kelly on our news desk.
Thank you. Experts across America all agree there is a war going on in America with no geographic or demographic boundaries. From desperate inner cities through wealthy urban enclaves, middle-class suburbs, and the poorest rural areas, the war rages on. Regardless of age, race, education, marital status, political leanings, or even athletic ability. The nation is under attack from what experts call cheap street-level heroin and easily obtainable opioids. And it's negatively impacting every community, employer, church, and family. Research on many levels show that each single day, the opioid epidemic kills or seriously impacts thousands of Americans. The National Institute on Drug Abuse now says the misuse of opioids like prescription pain relievers, heroin, and fentanyl has become a national crisis, affecting public health both socially and economically. The Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, or CDC, has estimated that nearly $79 billion is spent every year on healthcare due to opioid misuse, loss of work productivity, addiction treatment, and on the criminal justice system. In our program today, we show you just some of the ways these startling facts are impacting communities here in central Pennsylvania. Back to you.
Thank you, Georgia. We have several in-depth reports today on this crisis, and we will begin with its impact on local communities and families.
For this, we go to another part of our studio and members of one reporting team. They have been focusing on those impacted and the efforts of Pennsylvania's senior U.S. Senator Bob Casey. He and many others in the Commonwealth are trying to change the tide of addiction and tragedy. Here's Erin Kim.
Every day, more than 130 people in the United States die after overdosing on opioids. Recently, we've been taking a closer look at the impact on area families and how lawmakers on the federal level are working to stem the tide of this deadly epidemic. Our team, including reporter Georgia Kelly, spent time talking with Pennsylvania's senior U.S. Senator and with one area mother who shares the pain of losing one of her 2 sons after a decade of addiction. Here's our report.
It happens to everybody in anybody's family. It's not just something that happens to people in dark alleys.
Marianne Sinisi of Altoona, Pennsylvania, is among thousands of families here in central Pennsylvania losing a family member or friend to the opioid crisis. Today, as she wears a special engraved bracelet bearing the name of her oldest son, Sean, she speaks out to community groups through an organization she has spearheaded called Families United for Change. It was just 7 months ago when Marianne and her family lost their oldest son, Sean, to opioid dependency. Now, Marianne is trying to fight publicly for change in remembrance of Sean's long struggle with addiction that ended so tragically. This past Christmas, the family chose to erect a small tree at their church in Altoona to start making others aware of the crisis all around them.
So I want to change the way people look at families when they're dealing with it, and the person that has the dependency themselves, that they don't have to feel shamed by everybody else because they have enough shame going on in their soul.
In the beginning, the Sinisis say they brushed off possible signs that their son was struggling with addiction, thinking instead it was hormones and regular kid stuff. But it was much more serious.
And of course we came out with more and more that he was using different substances, that until he finally got to the point where it was that he couldn't hide it.
Eventually, she says Sean couldn't help his drug dependency, and it seemed the struggle was much greater than him.
He just had a lot of stuff and demons inside that he tried to fix with medications, whether they were prescribed or not. That's how he thought he was supposed to deal with it.
Mary Ann and her family dealt with the issue for almost a decade, with Sean in and out of rehabilitation centers.
If you're just treating it with another medication, or you take the dependency away and you don't fix the inner core of the problem, then he's going to obviously just keep relapsing over and over again, because the problem's not solved, and the only way they know how to solve the problem is to go back to what makes them feel better.
Even with all their support, they could not save Sean. Lawmakers on the state and federal level are seeing the opioid crisis affect families every day like the Sinisis, and are trying to solve this major epidemic. One of those working on the crisis from the federal level is attorney and Pennsylvania's 3-term senior U.S. Senator Bob Casey of Scranton. Myself and our team recently had an in-depth recorded conversation with Senator Casey through a special link to the senator's Capitol Hill office from our Innovation Park television studio. He gave us an in-depth perspective of what he and other federal lawmakers are trying to do to combat the crisis.
We have to deal with this problem. We have to get hold of it so it doesn't destroy our country. There's never been a public health emergency crisis like this in 100 years.
Casey's connection to the opioid crisis started from his own high school, Scranton Preparatory School. It happened when one of his classmates, Thomas, also known as Tad Decker, lost his own son, John, to addiction.
Where a sports injury leads to a surgical intervention and then painkillers, opioids, to treat an individual, and then that individual has trouble down the road, in this case, for a variety of reasons, led to his death. That alone is compelling enough, even if I did know Tad Decker.
Senator Casey says John Decker had multiple surgeries, which came with great pain and many medications. He is one of thousands who have died after becoming addicted to these prescription painkillers.
Everyone has to be committed to helping on this. And there's no excuse for someone sitting on the sidelines when we're trying to deal with this. So these companies have done some things, but they have to do a lot more.
Mary Ann Sinisi of Altoona says there is much more work to be done on all levels.
There's got to be something else out there that society as a whole has to come together with.
She has some very specific thoughts on what should be done on the local level to make people more aware of a plague impacting all of our communities.
9 years that we dealt with it and tried every angle that I could, because there's very limited resource out there, I think, to help you.
Reporting from Altoona in Blair County, Pennsylvania, I'm Georgia Kelly.
We also learned from Senator Casey that he is working on a project with other senators called the Infant Plan of Safe Care Improvement Act. The goal is to have a plan of action for newborns or older children. Among the many things it may do is to ensure that infants who are born already addicted because of their addicted mother will not go home unless it is to a safe environment. Back to you.
Thank you for that report. We have several more reports on this community crisis after a short public service message. When we come back, co-host Kayla Lang and Unique Miles will introduce you to our next reports.
What up, dude?
Just here at this party, man. Where'd you get those pain pills you gave me?
Some girl I know. Why?
I gave some to this guy. I think he OD'd. Do you think they could have been laced with fentanyl? Someone called an ambulance.
Taking pills that don't belong to you is dangerous. To learn more about the dangers of opioids, please visit the U.S. Attorney's Office Resist the Risk website.
Hello and welcome back to our special report on the opioid crisis in America and our Commonwealth. I'm Kayla Lang.
And I'm Unique Miles. We all know that local and state efforts have been underway for some time now to stem the tide of this crisis. Our next report focuses on the impact of this deadly epidemic on the central Pennsylvania region in and around Center County. We're specifically looking at cracking down on abuse through those who make the laws in Harrisburg and the legal system challenged with identifying and prosecuting those importing and selling deadly doses of fentanyl, heroin, and other illegal opioids.
Some of our center focus team members also explored what's being done to prosecute those selling deadly opioids in our communities and state legislation designed to toughen penalties. Center focus team members Nick Lombardo, Zach Hall, Chris Smith, and reporter Joe Bellawader have our next report.
Thank you, Keela. I'm Zach Hall.
And I'm Chris Smith. Among opioid deaths nationally, Pennsylvania is among the top 5. In Centre County, the current district attorney, Bernie Cantorna, and several veteran state legislators are doing many things to battle this crisis with firm legislation, a strong public message of addiction awareness, and convicting those of supplying the deadly drug.
Some of our county and state leaders are constantly out in the public conducting community forums and meeting with private groups to get a handle on the regional crisis in their jurisdiction. This helps them understand how community members feel about the problem and to also hear from those who have personally suffered from addiction or lost loved ones to this terrible plague on our communities.
We, along with our show host Nick Lombardo and reporter Joe Bellawader, have been taking a closer look at what is being done to combat the problem through local and state government. We also attended one of the many public forums on the crisis here in the region. Joe Bellawader has a report.
Information is power, and that if we don't understand the nature of the addiction, we can't address it. We can't help those people that you know, the people that you love, avoid some of the results that happen far too often.
The words of Centre County District Attorney Bernie Cantorna at a recent public forum in Centre County designed to educate community members on opioid addiction, prevention, treatment, and recovery. Cantorna says the ultimate goal of these public forums is to know what resources are available to keep loved ones and the community safe. On this early spring day, only small but a concerned group of citizens, public officials, doctors, and members of HOPE were gathered in this high school auditorium. Panelists headed by the district there were here to address and understand the growing plague of opioid addiction impacting their homes, schools, and communities.
Long-term recovery from addiction is possible for every individual, and how they find that path is unique for every person.
The series of ongoing public forums are co-sponsored by a very engaged Centre County group called Hope Heroin Opioid Prevention and Education. Meanwhile, others in the region are speaking out on the crisis. One of those members is Penn State law professor Richard Setgast. He has witnessed many of the terrible consequences of this crisis. Attorney Setgast joined Penn State's prestigious law school after serving 7 years as an assistant public defender for Centre County. During his time as a public defender, Attorney Setgast became one of the many in the region bearing personal witness to the terrible consequences of the addiction.
I mean, there was a lot of people that I represented that were addicted to opioids, and opiates would be the cause of, some of their troubles, whether it be, something as simple as a DUI, thefts, burglaries, robberies, things like that. I mean, you're correct in calling it an epidemic. It's so widespread and affects so many different people, and also people that you wouldn't traditionally think as being, that would be drug addicts.
Meanwhile, longtime Centre County State Representative Carrie Benninghoff also sees the crisis close up in his 171st district. Part of that also comes from the state certified coroner's training program he attended in Hershey. Benninghoff has many strong views on the crisis and what can potentially be done to combat it.
Opioids have just skyrocketed recently, but the goal is to reduce the number of people we're losing here in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is still losing on average 15 people a day. That's over 300 people per month. If you think about it, that's like a jumbo jet going down every month in the state of Pennsylvania.
But Representative Benninghoff says that the state legislature has taken some initiatives. One is a prescription drug monitoring program, which he believes is one of the most successful measures passed in the last few years in Harrisburg. It allows law enforcement and medical professionals to better monitor people abusing prescriptions.
We also passed something called the Good Samaritan Law. Should you be with somebody and they overdose or they get to the point where they're comatose and they can't respond, and you make a call 911, a good faith, you stay with that individual, even though you may have been partying with them or you may even be in possession of something, the Good Samaritan Law would protect you for not being charged at that particular occurrence. We're not encouraging people using this, but we are encouraging people to make that call, save that life.
Center County's newest district attorney, Bernie Cantorner, is at the forefront of prosecuting those responsible for providing the deadly fentanyl, heroin, and other illegal prescription drugs that are killing area citizens who are addicted. Attorney Cantorner admits the ongoing crisis is worsening by the day in Center County and across the Commonwealth completely.
Anecdotally, I can tell you that what I see coming through the county is I am beginning to see people who had substance use disorders with people who were using heroin, right? We're seeing an uptick in methamphetamine. Methamphetamine has been an issue throughout central Pennsylvania for a very long time. Here in Center County, we still have, I think it's because of the resources that we have, we've been able to not have that become the epidemic and issue it is in other places. And frankly, that's exactly what we intend to try to do again.
Cantorner also has advice on what to do if you, a family member, or a friend are struggling with the disease.
You can go out, you can go to your local pharmacy and you can get a subscription for Narcan. The governor has put a standing order there. So if you had a family member and that family member had an opioid use disorder and was using and abusing and was at risk of killing themselves, you go down to the pharmacy right now, fill an order. You can have it sitting in your car, you can have it sitting in your kitchen, you can have it sitting in your bathroom. You yourself can learn how to be administered and maybe save the life of a loved one.
These public officials, community groups, and private citizens impacted in some way all seem to have the same message from our investigation. They say that the opioid crisis will not be stopped overnight, and they believe the crisis impacts everyone in some way. It does not discriminate. They also say that it'll take everyone's effort to stem the tide of this terrible epidemic and help to make Pennsylvania communities a better place to live, work, and raise families. Reporting in Center County, I'm Joe Ballawater.
Thank you, Joe. Center County legislators in Harrisburg and the county prosecutors say they will continue to fight for the safety of all citizens with legislation that doesn't overstep boundaries and attempts to prevent future opioid drugs. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you for that report. We'll take a look at some other regional efforts to curb the tide of addiction and tragedy when we return from this short break.
Who are you? A son and brother like no other? You are a miracle to your family. Who are you when the people closest to you are down? You are the reason to get up and keep fighting, curing and righting the wrong. But who are you when you are alone? Who are you when you are down? Who do you turn to? What do you turn to? More than 63,000 lives were lost to drug overdose in 2016, the most lethal year yet for the drug overdose epidemic. Most of which were addicted to painkillers and medicine meant to help but instead turned into something which took their life. Painkillers used for the wrong pain, addicted and hooked, driving you insane. Your name is who you are. Your love and affection is who you are. But this isn't you. Find help.
Thank you for staying with us for this special report on the opioid crisis in our Commonwealth. I'm Unique Miles.
And I'm Kayla Lang. Law enforcement plays a huge role in this crisis, but not just in the investigation and the arrest of those importing and selling illegal opioids. Area police join prosecutors and other community leaders in regularly going out in the public to educate our communities on how serious this epidemic is becoming. Myself and reporter Tatiana Frazier have taken a close-up look at what two Center County police agencies are doing to stem the tide of addiction through public awareness and education. State College, Pennsylvania, a historic college town with flourishing township suburbs in the heart of central Pennsylvania, with the famed Pennsylvania State University at its doorsteps. The region surrounding this famed institution is regularly ranked nationally as one of the safest and best areas to live in and also retire. But despite the area's many attractions, this seemingly ideal community is not trouble-free. It shares the same dark shadow of the opioid addiction with nearly every community in America. State College Police Community Relations and Crime Prevention Specialist Adam Salyard says the progression of the opioid crisis, at least in the borough of State College, is not on the scale of some communities, but it's still troublesome for this location. Salyard spends a lot of time talking with community groups and schools to educate the public on the growing problem.
Over the past 3 to 5 years, as a county, Center County has seen on average 18 to probably 22 deaths a year from opioid type overdoses.
In tackling the regional problem, State College Police works closely with other agencies including Penn State Police. And like thousands of other law enforcement, Penn State Police knows that many of these currently addicted to opioids are repeat offenders. They have dealt with these cases.
He's just going to do it again next week and again next week. I personally have talked to police officers that have Narcan the same person 4, 5, 6 times.
Spolveri says the problem will not be solved easily. The life-saving drug naloxone is now part of the equipment in every area police patrol car here and across the Commonwealth. Officer Salyard says it can instantly bring an overdosing person back to sobriety.
Naloxone goes to the brain and opens up the receptors that are telling you to breathe, because opioids basically repress your breathing. So it goes to the brain cells and basically cuts them off and says, hey, don't breathe anymore. For whatever reason, I don't know the actual science behind that.
All area police and emergency personnel are regularly trained on how to use this equipment, and many lives have been saved.
It's super easy to use. It was a little more complicated a few years ago. You had to take it apart and put it all together. Now it is simply open this up, stick it in a nostril and press the button. It's just a spray.
With the help of the community and the support of the local police and first responders, Center County law enforcement agencies say they are trying their best to help tackle the opioid crisis.
It's not something we're going to solve on our own. It's really going to take a partnership from across the board, kind of from all levels of government, from all levels of community agencies. And, you know, I really see that's one of the only ways we're going to really combat the issue.
Reporting from Center Focus, I'm Kayla Lang. Thank you. Statistics now indicate 1 in every 4 families in this region and across the Commonwealth struggle with an opioid-related substance abuse problem.
For the past several years, Mount Nittany Medical Center has donated life-saving naloxone to local law enforcement agencies, including State College, Penn State, and other area township agencies. We have learned during our investigation that police and emergency medical personnel constantly receive required training in the administration of the medication as part of their regular curriculum.
As we learned, training for officers is state mandated according to State College officer Adam Salyards. He also personally conducts annual in-service updates to department personnel.
For an officer to stay certified, Salyard says they have to maintain first aid training, including commonly used opioids. After another short break, we'll introduce our final report with fellow hosts Nick Lombardo and Mike Fortunio.
Waiting to die. That's what I'm doing. I am laying on this ground, fully conscious, but utterly immobile. Why? Because I didn't listen. Because I pushed out every lesson I had been taught. Because I thought lots of people do it. There's no way it's gonna kill me. Because I was selfish. Because I didn't think about the consequences to my actions. Because I wasn't content with all the blessings that I already had. Because I didn't pay attention to people that I loved that were trying to help me. Because I refused to seek guidance. Because I wanted the world to know that I was independent. Because I allowed my pride to cloud my judgment. Because I ignored the destruction it was causing me physically and mentally. Because I just wanted to be accepted. Here I am, lying on the floor, about to become a mere memory, waiting to die. Because I took opioids. Please don't make the same mistake.
Hello, and welcome back. I'm Nick Lombardo.
And I'm Mike Fortunio. Today, in our final report, we take a look at how area emergency personnel are handling this crisis. Obviously, as frontline responders, they must receive training in the administration of the medication as part of their regular curriculum.
Team members Unique Miles and Courtney Allen have been taking a close-up look at how first responders are doing their job in the region. As they will explain, it also personally impacts these professionals who often have to save the same person multiple times with the life-saving naloxone they carry as part of their critical life-saving equipment. Here's their report.
And that's the scary thing, is that it's not always the people that you think are going to be doing drugs that are getting into these things and you know, risking their lives.
First responders like Rob Nessie, an Alpha Fire equipment technician, are spending the majority of their day waiting in the station to respond to emergency calls. Often, it's all hands on deck.
paramedics and the EMTs around here have been a lot busier in recent years with opioid calls than in the past. I know it's becoming a lot more prevalent.
Here and across central Pennsylvania, opioid abuse is the cause of rising overdose deaths.
What struck me the most was when we were on a call for a girl that overdosed while driving, and she was about my age, and she was a college student, and not what you would look at and consider to be a stereotypical drug user.
The victims of these overdoses are the initial priority, but first responders are also at risk.
Drugs that are out there now are so potent that we could overdose just by not having the proper personal protection equipment on. So if we don't have the proper gloves or respirator on, and the stuff goes airborne or gets on our skin, we could actually overdose from some of the opioids just by touching them.
Between 2015 and now, Pennsylvania's medical examiner data shows that the number of drug-related overdose deaths in the state increased more than 70%. This includes drugs such as heroin, fentanyl, cocaine, and prescription opioids.
But really it is almost, I almost want to say common.
Although state statistics say the most common user is a male ranging from 25 to 34 years old, Center Lifelake EMS Eliza Shaw says there is no typical victim.
Because it seems to be that most people that aren't familiar with it want to attribute it to the college crowd, the kids that are known to be out drinking at Penn State's party school, but it's really quite the opposite.
A lot of people that are using these drugs aren't the people that you'd think at all.
In a lot of cases, repeat users are combative after resuscitation. This violent backlash is something that keeps first responders vigilant at all times.
And always our first priority is our own safety. So in those situations, we're definitely looking out for needles or anything like that, or for the patient to react violently or something like that when they start coming around from the opioid.
Naloxone is a synthetic drug that blocks opioid receptors in the nervous system, reversing the effects of an overdose.
With opioids and narcotic overdoses is that it suppresses the respiratory drive, and that's what kills people in an overdose. It isn't so much the level of the medication itself, it's that they stop breathing.
We're trained in how to administer Narcan or naloxone to reverse the effects of opioids during an opioid overdose.
Until your fingers on either side of the nozzle are against the person's nose. Press the plunger firmly to give the full dose of Narcan nasal spray. Remove the device from the nostril after giving the dose.
So how does this epidemic affect their day-to-day lives?
We got violently intertwined in the back of the ambulance on the way to the hospital, and ended up pretty much bouncing off of all four walls. Something that we're suspecting to be related to narcotics. It's really common to have a nasty situation.
Reporting in Center County, I'm Unique Miles.
Well, that's it for this special edition of Center Focus. We would like to thank all of the public and private agencies, community leaders, elected officials, and private citizens who have made this in-depth report possible.
For all of our Center Focus team here in the Innovation Park studios of the Donald P. Belisario College of Communications, have a good evening and a safe and happy summer season to come.